The Louisiana Mid-Continent Oil and Gas Association is a trade association for all sectors of the oil and gas industry, and we host our annual meeting here in New Orleans each year about this time to bring our members up to date on the challenges, kind of a year in reflection and also looking forward. And of course, our panel of speakers certainly gave us an opportunity to ask questions and to look into a crystal ball about what is the future of the oil and gas industry and kind of what have we learned from last year at this time. So it's a great meeting for all of us to come together to network with our different service support people and hear from some of the experts in the field about what they think the oil and gas industry is going to look like a year or two from now.
We are the nation's second largest independent refiner with a 6-refinery system that can process just under 1.2 million barrels per day. About half that capacity is in the Midwest and the other half is here in the Gulf Coast. Our Garyville refinery that Bubby operates about a half-hour drive from here has a rated capacity of 490,000 barrels per day, making it the third largest refinery in the country. And many days, Bubby operates that plant with a number that begins with a 5. I'm not going to make that number public, but I'm very proud when he does that. At the retail level, we own and operate 1,375 Speedway gas stations throughout the Midwest, and we also market our fuel through nearly 5,100 jobber-supplied Marathon branded stations in the Midwest and Southeast. On the logistics side, we own and operate or lease about 9,600 miles of pipeline, as well as carefully integrated system of barges, rail cars, trucks, and terminals. That system gives us a lot of options to move crude oil and refined products to meet the market needs quickly. And at the end of the day, that's what it's all about, meeting the market's needs. After all, what is the market? It's millions upon millions of people. So when our industry meets the market's needs, we're able to make people's lives better by providing the energy we all need to work, live, and prosper. As we know from long experience, states that have strong oil and gas industries generally appreciate how hydrocarbons make our lives better. It's true in my home state of Ohio, and it's certainly true here in Louisiana. That's because people who live here are aware of how much effort and investment it takes to produce oil and gas and how resource intensive the refining process is. In Louisiana, more than 62,000 men and women work in the oil and gas industry directly. And according to the American Petroleum Institute data, even in 2009, which was a very difficult year for the industry, it supported a total of over 375,000 jobs in this state.
This organization, LMOGA, obviously has a very proud history. But what you may not know is there are a few other institutions that were founded like you in 1923. But most of those have fallen by the wayside. Let me just mention a few of them. The USSR and its experimental calendar with 5-day work weeks, no longer here. Yankee Stadium, and I'm sure what would be a local favorite, the New York Moderation League was created in 1923 to help repeal prohibition. Well, LMOGA has outlasted all of them, and rightly so, because you're an important part to an industry, you're vital to Louisiana and to the country, and for that matter, you're important to the world. And certainly you're very important to Shell. Shell has more roots in Louisiana than just about any other place in the United States, with the possible exception of Houston. In 1954, our New Orleans office was in the building right next door to where we are this morning, actually connected to this hotel. We hosted receptions in the International Room. The Petroleum Club was on the 3rd floor, and that was the place to see and be seen, of course, in those early days of the offshore. Now, we, of course, liked being right in the thick of things, and we still do. Now, today, every part of our business operates in this state. We're a major producer in the Gulf of Mexico. We produce natural gas in the northern part of the state. Our pipelines run through the state. We have refineries, chemical plants, terminals, and Shell gas stations all over. We distribute marine fuels and lubricants out of the Port of New Orleans, and we even process asphalt in St. Rose. And we also have valuable links with LSU and its engineering schools, and of course have more than just a few diehard Tigers fans in the company. Now, LSU is a talent pipeline for us, as is the whole state of Louisiana. Through our relationships with the university and with organizations like LMOGA, we've undertaken innovative projects from coastal revitalization to advocacy of fresh ideas on policy. So Louisiana is and always has been a great place for Shell to do business.
I want to rewind the clock, and I rewind the clock to a time that was unpleasant for all of us here, very unpleasant for all of us here in this room. And that was about May 1st of 2010. At that time, the McConville well was spilling at full speed, and everyone, I think practically everyone in Congress and DC and the administration was looking for someone to blame. And more importantly, I believe they were looking for someone to punish. And the offshore oil and gas industry was right in the sights, right in the gun sights of those that were looking for someone to blame and to punishment. You couldn't turn on your TV 24 hours a day and night. You could see the well spewing out oil into the Gulf of Mexico. Soon that was added with images of soiled beaches, oily sheens on water, and I don't think anyone will ever forget that image of the oiled pelican. All that added great pressure to Congress to do something. And the administration actually led the charge about what to do about the spill. They did that by dismantling the MMS. They also filed many lawsuits. And they also put in a moratorium, which all of you know very well. And I don't think any one of us were surprised there would be at least a temporary stand down of deep water drilling activities. I think everyone expected that. It made sense. But I don't think anyone expected a long-term moratorium on all types of exploration, both deep water and shallow water. And I don't think anyone expected the greater effects that occurred from the permitting slowdown as things started to try and pick up again, and the tremendous cost of jobs and energy to the United States.
I'm especially honored to have the Shell's president, Marvin Odom, here with us today to accept the award. But what we're going to do here, I thought it was very appropriate to actually recognize each of the assets that Shell has in the state and the appropriate recipient of those awards, and they're all with us here today. A little hand for Mr. Marvin Odom, the president of Shell Oil Company. Thank you. For the Gulf of Mexico and Shell's assets, and it recognizes all the major significant firsts that I spoke of earlier, Mr. John Hollowell, Executive Vice President of Deepwater. Motiva Narco Refining Company, a major 220,000 barrel a day capacity located in St. Charles Parish. We have with us today the refinery manager, Mr. Don Weaver. Thank you very much, Don. Hey, for the Motiva Convent Refinery, another major refinery with 227,000 barrels a day capacity located in St. James Parish. We have Mr. David Brignac with us, the refinery manager and a board member of LMOGA. Thank you very much. Next, I'd like to recognize Shell Pipeline, representing a pipeline system that moves over 7 million barrels of crude and refined products across 10,000 miles of pipe in 22 states in the Gulf of Mexico. Mr. Neil Buckingham will be accepting on behalf of the pipeline. For Shell Western E&P, Exploration and Production, which represents Shell's onshore assets and presence in the Haynesville, we have Mr. Fred Palmer.
It brings me great pleasure to introduce this year's winner of LMOGA's Blue Heron Award. The Blue Heron Award is given annually and recognizes the exceptional environmental stewardship in association with the oil and gas activity, as well as the unique effort of the recipient to address the compatibility of the industry with the environmental progress. This year's recipient, the Marine Well Containment Company. In conjunction with the recognition of the MWCC, we also want to recognize the efforts of the 4 founding member companies, those LMOGA members who made it the initial commitment of the $1 billion invested to organize the MWCC: Chevron, Conoco, ExxonMobil, and Shell. Gentlemen, as I call your name, please join me at the podium. Marty Massey is the Chief Executive Officer of the Marine Well Containment Company. Dan Smallwood, the Chief Operating Officer of the MWCC. And representing the 4 founding companies, Chevron, Warner Williams, the Vice President of Chevron Gulf of Mexico Business Unit and a member of the LMOGA Board. Conoco Phillips, Bobby Nolan, General Manager of the Health, Safety, and Environment for Upstream. ExxonMobil, Clay Vaughn, Vice President of Global Deepwater, ExxonMobil Development Company. And Shell, John Hollowell, Executive Vice President, Deepwater, Shell Resource Company. Gentlemen, it's an honor to present this award to your company, and congratulations to all.
Just a couple slides real quick. I want to share with you. Again, observation that, at one time we had basically a 7-to-1 ratio, 6-to-1 ratio between the price of oil and natural gas. And, it was pretty reliable, pretty predictable. And you see here what's happening now. Instead of a 6-to-1 ratio, you basically now have a 41, depending on what day of the week you're looking at, a 41-to-1 ratio. Okay, so what is it? It's about 7 times the energy in a barrel of oil versus the MC of gas, about 7-to-1. So natural gas is absolutely the best bargain in the whole world when it comes to commodity, because the spread there is 41-to-1 now. Who knows where it's going? I'm not real sure. And in talking to some of the folks who are looking at gas to liquids, I hear 20-to-1 works, 15-to-1 works. So we got a little room here, and hopefully we can take advantage of it, because I think the advantage for Louisiana now is not going to be so much in the exploration side. We certainly have enjoyed a good run on that. I think that the advantage now is going to be more about the petrochemical, and we'll talk about that. I think that big time game changer there. Just a couple other slides. Obviously, we know why it is. Y'all seen this 1,000 times before. And if you take a look at the consumption of natural gas versus production, you can see, the import band is getting narrower there. But take a look, and I'm not sure if this thing has a pointer on it. No, but if you take a look at the blue and the red line as they are coming together, we're at a point where perhaps if you just scale this out 3 or 4 more years, we may be in a situation where, again, our production is exceeding our consumption. All right, it's a good thing from the E&P side, but we've got to find wider and broader uses of natural gas.
Louisiana is a province that has a long and distinguished history of oil and gas production, and the future is bright. We've got obviously a lot of great things. The development of shale gas here in Louisiana, the fact that we're producing so much gas, now begins to evolve into job creation in our chemical and our petrochemical business, which is a major user of natural gas. And clearly, we're excited about that. We also have a long and distinguished history of petrochemical manufacturing here. But we went through a pretty tough period around 2008 when natural gas prices really went up, that folks were looking to establish their operations in other parts of the globe. We now see those folks wanting to come back. So it's always a balance of investment in the drill bit, in the exploration side, and then also the opportunity to take advantage of low prices on the manufacturing side.
We use rigs as a big barometer of economic activity in the oil and gas industry. They're certainly highly correlated with prices, and you can see rig movements across the big basins across the world here in this chart that I've mapped out on the screen. It's certainly a relatively busy chart, but the thing I want to highlight is this big decrease, or this big, actually I don't know if I've got a pointer on this. I don't want to touch something because I may turn something off. But you can see the black line or the darker line is the United States and the drilling activity there. And as we move through the early part of the decade, we were certainly lagging what you saw in other places of the world where you had a much more attractive, robust drilling rate. And you can see about mid part of the decade and moving on, as we started to develop more and more of these unconventional resources, that rig activity started to pick up. And it started to make North America as attractive a basin as we saw throughout the world. And it was a place where a lot of producers wanted to be, a lot of capital wanted to be invested. And you can see an area where we were creating a lot of jobs and a lot of benefits, starting certainly in Texas and the Barnett, moving into Louisiana and in the Haynesville, and then moving out throughout most of the rest of the country over the more recent period. We had a big drop, obviously, in most of those basins in the aftermath of the global economic crisis, the financial crisis, and the recession, and we see this big pickup. Now, while the United States has lagged a little bit behind some of these other areas, you look at that rapid increase. I mean, that is a movement from a peak to trough that is almost, double itself. And I think that's another thing that shows the resilience of this industry and the ability to bring capital and bring resources and create jobs over a relatively short period of time. So if you're really thinking about a growth generator from an economic perspective, you're looking at it from a policy perspective, you really can't ignore statistics like this because it's certainly behind all these rigs are a lot of capital and a lot of jobs. If you look, the Secretary alluded to this earlier as well, throughout most of the last decade, we saw a big investment in horizontal drilling, particularly in gas rigs, and a big emphasis on natural gas drilling. We started reversing trends that we had seen for the prior decade of having more gas rigs active as opposed to crude oil rigs. But we've had this decoupling in prices that the Secretary showed earlier that's been sending signals to the market about how to reinvest those dollars and what resources are the best to go after. And today, for the first time in about 17 years, we're seeing more development in these crude and liquid areas as opposed to natural gas, really sending, I think, a paradigm shift change to the market. And I think one that interestingly shows that these markets are really good allocators of where those capital dollars ought to go.
What is my outlook for the Gulf of Mexico and its role in securing America's energy future? Again, the bottom line is that I am enthusiastic about the Gulf and what offshore oil and gas development in this region offers Louisiana, the Gulf Coast, and America. My optimism for the Gulf of Mexico and the role of offshore oil and gas development in securing our energy future is grounded in part on the strength and credibility of BOEM and BSEE as regulators. As the MPC concluded, one of the pillars of maintaining public trust is confidence in properly resourced, effective oversight. Moreover, we cannot lose sight of the fact that the Gulf of Mexico still has the greatest, by a large margin, untapped resource potential in the entire United States OCS. I've heard some people say, including some folks who actually know better, that exploration in the Gulf of Mexico means simply drilling in the same old places. The truth is that the Gulf of Mexico is the crown jewel of the U.S. OCS and will remain so for the foreseeable future. The Gulf of Mexico, in particular the deep water, already has several world-class producing basins, and just in the past year, there have been a number of significant new discoveries. According to my agency's recent 2011 assessment of undiscovered, technically recoverable oil and gas resources on the nation's outer continental shelf, we estimate that the central Gulf of Mexico holds over 30 billion barrels of oil and 133.9 trillion cubic feet of natural gas yet to be discovered. This is nearly double the resource potential of even the Chukchi Sea, which is a second. The western Gulf of Mexico is just behind the Chukchi with over 12 billion barrels of oil and nearly 80 trillion cubic feet of natural gas that's technically recoverable but yet to be discovered. Right off of the coast of Louisiana is a new oil and gas frontier that will fuel the state's economy and help our nation meet its energy needs for decades to come.
What I want to do first is talk a little about Enterprise, because you'll get the flavor of really how this project was born. Each company I know has to start with something many times of little significance. Back in 1968, our long-standing chairman, Dan Duncan, started in the Mount Bellevue area with basically 2 propane trucks, about $10,000 of capital, and a customer. And today, as you can see, we're the largest publicly traded energy partnership in the United States. We've got a very diversified, integrated energy midstream system We serve producers and consumers of natural gas liquids, NGLs, crude oil, petrochemicals, and refined products. This is probably the most compelling slide in our company, and I know our chairman for many years, this was kind of our Bible per se. As you can see, every component of our midstream network connects to either an upstream or downstream component, and what it does, it provides us with the capability of creating efficiencies when we work with producers or end users to create the most competitive transportation or storage and sometimes even buying or selling of products. So basically, when you take the schematic on slide 4 and turn it into a map, this is what you have. We've got 50,000 miles of natural gas liquid, crude oil, refined products, and petrochemical pipelines, 192 million barrels of NGL and refined products, crude oil storage. That's basically probably the most of anywhere in the world. 8 billion cubic feet of natural gas storage, 25 natural gas processing plants, and 20 NGL and propylene fractionators. So this is what we've been doing as a company that will leg into what I have to talk to you about today. During the last couple of years, we've spent almost $3 billion of capital creating infrastructure out of these shale plays. And with that, you know, it's important. You can see how rigorous we are to make sure that we're on budget. Actually, all these projects we've been about 10% under budget, but right now, we've got $6.5 billion of capital deployed in infrastructure projects today, i.e. that are being constructed. And all that capital is going into all these shale basins to connect the production to the market.
In the beginning, Cheniere Energy, and like Chris said, Cheniere's a little bit of a microcosm of the whole industry in the United States. We started in 1996. We were an exploration and production company. And you're looking at the exploration and production group now. So we still have producing wells. They are offshore. But the chairman quickly decided it was going to be harder to find natural gas in the deep waters, and it was going to be more expensive to drill. We actually started with a huge seismic shoot here in Louisiana. So in the late 90s, he decided that because we were going to need more natural gas in this country, but didn't necessarily have the resources in the ground, that we ought to start looking at imports. And one of the first things I did for the company was actually look at all of the ports in the United States to see where we could develop LNG import terminals for Cheniere. And then we'll go forward from there. So you've seen this map before. This is the pipeline grid of the United States. We decided that LNG import terminals made sense in the Gulf Coast because you could then vaporize that natural gas and use the infrastructure that was already there to be able to put that natural gas into the infrastructure in the Gulf, send it up to the Northeast, and hit 75% of the market in the United States. A lot of other people decided on the same thing. We also were a very, very small company at the time. We didn't think we had the backing, the power, the money to be able to fight very congested ports close to populations in the Northeast where you might get significant pushback on a NIMBY issue of having a large industrial facility in a port, and an industrial facility that, frankly, people were not familiar with that could be considered a hazard or dangerous. So we started our process in late 1999. We put in our permits. We started construction in 2004, and in 2008, we opened our Sabine Pass terminal, the largest regas facility in the world by vaporization capacity at 4 billion cubic feet per day. We have 5 LNG tanks there that hold 160,000 cubic meters, about 3 BCF each. Very large project, world scale. Cost $1.6 billion, another $500 million for the pipeline that's associated with it. And as we opened that facility, we had been watching shale gas for 2 years. And it was an uh-oh moment, quite frankly, because we realized we were opening a facility that was going to be basically obsolete.
Thought I'd better introduce Sasol. A lot of people say, who's Sasol? You know, does that stand for something? Sasol is a company that was developed in South Africa. It was founded by the South African government, and it's an integrated energy company. It uses coal, natural gas, oil, and it has a unique technology blend that really is the driver for the company. So their primary driver is use of the Fischer-Tropsch technology, and they're using that to convert coal to basically transportation fuels in South Africa. We're converting natural gas to diesel and jet in Qatar and also in Sasolburg, South Africa. So our footprint is to take raw materials and through conversion technologies create transportation fuels, chemical feedstocks. This is our Secunda plant. It produces 150,000 barrels per day of transportation fuels for South Africa. A lot of chemical processes also associated with it. The reaction, the Fischer-Tropsch that is used at Secunda is the high temperature Fischer-Tropsch. It makes more gasoline type products and chemical feedstocks. Ethylene is a byproduct of that process. This facility provides in excess of 25 to 40%, depending upon the year, of South Africa's transportation fuel needs. The GTL production process, gas to liquids production process, the important thing about the process, I think, is captured in the box at the bottom. And basically, the center line in the box at the bottom says that to produce approximately 100,000 barrels per day of products, it requires 1 billion standard cubic feet per day of natural gas, of methane. And what we're proposing to do in Lake Charles is on the order of 100,000. It's between 90 and 100,000 barrels per day. So we'll be using about 1 billion standard cubic feet per day of gas.
The oil and gas industry is a key component to the quality of life here in Louisiana. As I said, the amount of people that work in this industry is very important, but it goes beyond just the parochialisms of Louisiana. Louisiana provides energy security for America. Without Louisiana, without the Gulf of Mexico, we would be much more susceptible and much more energy dependent on foreign countries. So Louisiana is a very big player in the whole energy scheme. And of course, from a parochial standpoint, we love the oil and gas industry here because it is such a great driver of our economy.